All right, welcome to week number 3. As we mentioned a couple weeks ago, we are going to be focusing over the next 8 weeks, I guess over the next 5 weeks. At this point, we're going to be looking at how can we remove some brakes before we're going to worry about pushing on the gas. So, reason for that being, we gave that illustration. You have a souped up car, all the brakes are slammed down to the floor. You're not going to go anywhere, you're just going to break a lot of stuff, nothing's really going to happen. So, one of the breaks we talked about already was hunger, and then we also talked about sleep and stress. So I have a couple notes here for you on stress and stress management and what that looks like. So the first thing we're going to do when we're talking about stress management is define what is stress. So stress is just going to be anything outside of our normal capabilities. So that's going to make sense in the physical context, in the mental context, in the emotional context, our ability to handle emotions and complex emotions and decipher them. If we can't do that, we're going to be stressed, right? We're going to have anxiety, we're going to have all an emotional breakdown because we're incapable of that. So physical stress can be pretty straightforward. You worked out too hard, you're sick, those types of things. That's going to be a stress. If you sometimes you will adapt to stress. That's really what we're trying to see happen when we're trying to build muscle. We're trying to stress our muscles in the right amount of stress, not too much that they can't recover from, but just enough so that they say like, hey, you're not good enough. You need to get a little bit better. You need to get a little bit stronger. But if we do too much, then that's a whole different story. However, we also have mental stress, right? Mental stress can seem a little bit more vague and a little bit harder to understand. But if you have high amount of stress, so huge stressor mentally, something like trauma, you're going to get trauma response, right? Your brain's going to make deep-seated changes to your behavior and your habits and how you perceive things, right? They can be really hard to unwind. It's like if you snapped your arm off, right? It's going to be really hard to recover from that versus small little stressors, right? So there's also a volume of stress that can occur. So you may avoid situations. You may get bitter and angry at a situation before it even happens because your brain's trying to prepare for something to happen, right? That can be the result of mental stresses. So what I want to propose to you here mainly tonight, apart from some practices, is what is the difference between mental stress and physical stress. Kind of go over in your mind right now, like what are the differences between those two in terms of how your body responds, right? Not the external response, bigger muscles, you're snappy with people in certain situations for no reason, you avoid certain conversations. Not that how we respond, but what happens physiologically inside of our body and our brain chemistry and our body chemistry. What's the difference between the two? There isn't one, right? There isn't one, which is really cool because that means we have one stress bucket and everything adds to it and it gets detracted from all the same, right? So if we have a large amount of stress, mental stress, we can't work out really, really hard. And workout can be kind of complex sometimes because it is a stress reliever, but if we overdo our capabilities physically, even though we're there for something mental, we can actually harm ourselves because we're adding too much stress in. Don't worry about that. I just want you to know these things, have these things up in your noggin. What happens when we increase our resilience is it can be mental or physical, but it's really hard to increase mental resilience, and a lot of times it requires something physical. What is really cool is if you cannot impose force on our body, which is physical stress, you have low stress tolerance physically. Your bucket's smaller. You can increase the size of your stress bucket, the proverbial all-encompassing stress bucket, by adding force to your body and overcoming it repetitively, aka resistance training and exercise. It's so profound. I don't think people understand how profound it is. So what happens long term, what happens even acutely in the short term, when we have a strong physical body that is capable of large amounts of physical stress, which means we have a large stress bucket, that means the amount of instances where that bucket is overflowing is going to be fewer. That's profound. If you have coaching experience, you would realize how profound that really is. And I see it in people's everyday lives. But when you feel under control, when you're doing something proactive and positive, when you're taking your life, kind of in your own hands and your own responsibility and putting the blame on you, and you're getting stronger physically, you're doing a lot of great things to improve your stress tolerance. What that does is that means you will have less of a response to the same stressors in your life. that means you can make better decisions with more consistency. So the first avenue that I take is get your body functioning and moving well. That's why your program is designed the way that it is designed. And you're not just doing jump squats and influencer booty band side steps that are absolutely pointless and useless and the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Sorry, I'm a scientist more than I am a fitness influencer, I think. But what's really profound about this is, I keep using that word because that's exactly what it is. When we improve our resilience, then we have less of a stress response, and less of a cortisol spike. So you've probably heard of that. And people think that stress and cortisol are directly related, and that's not true. You can have somebody sitting in the middle of a war completely at peace with really low cortisol levels. You can have somebody sitting in a cubicle in an office having a panic and anxiety attack, and their cortisol is through the roof. So what's going on there? It's our perception of the stress, our perception of the threat. So when we our stress bucket is bigger and it doesn't feel very full, our perception of the stress goes down, which means our cortisol response doesn't go up, and a lot of our other hormones now can be made, and then we get healthier, and then we get stronger, then we lose more body fat, and then we have a better mental state, so we make better decisions, and it cascades and snowballs. Now take all that, flip it and reverse it. That's how most people are living, right? They're stressed, they have anxiety, they can't eat well. A lot of really bad things are happening, okay? So this is why stress management is the best fitness plan. Because if you don't take care of this part, you're going to be in trouble. So here is the part that you need. Here's the part at the end that we really need to understand. If you don't do something to recognize if you're overwhelmed, if you don't do something to carve out time in your day for yourself, to do whatever you do mentally or emotionally. This is why I'm a big fan of church, right? Whether you're spiritual or mystical or you're anything, a good church seems to be the place where you are going to have the highest amount of emotional intelligence taught to people. And this is incredibly important in modern day life. You can't be a thriving human being with low emotional intelligence. It's just not possible. You can do pretty well. You can do great. You can make it through life. But if you want to thrive, emotional intelligence is really important because it's our ability to understand complex situations and ideas and things and filter and process them and not allow them to become overwhelming and become something that produces anxiety, that produces stress in our life. So we know how important stress management is. Emotional intelligence can be really, really important in that. So physical resilience, mental resilience, emotional resilience is one thing. But the other side of that is maybe we don't need to be resilient at all because we just remove the stress, right? We don't have to worry about it as much. So that's really something to think about. And one of the ways you should be doing that is look at them, address them, talk about them. Pretty much talking to somebody, talk therapy. Okay, you don't have to call it therapy. Hiring a trainer. We joke all the time that we're therapists. But that's why, because we're helping people, because you can't look in the mirror and do it, right? It's really hard to look in the mirror, have a conversation with yourself unless you're insane. But what you can do is talk to another person about these things, and it allows your brain to have this interaction where we can remove them from our brain, put them out here on the table and kind of work on them, okay? But understanding your stress, the last little piece I will leave you with that is something tangible that you can work on is going to be your schedule. Organize it. Organize your schedule, okay? Have it on a piece of paper, have it on a document. I do it every single week on this thing right here. Every Sunday I go through the whole thing, and when I don't, I have a more stressful week. So it's not that it doesn't change every week, because it does, and I had to let go of the fact that that's not going to happen. But what happens is it's not up here trying to be processed and computed 24/7. I know it's down here. I can look at it, I can change it, and I can handle it. So that's it on stress management. We are going to talk in just a couple days on the guilt part of food, on reasons why we eat, and give you a lot of really good information. I will see you then.